The silence of the Vogue Heights usually felt like a crown, but tonight, it felt like a shroud. I had stayed late at the office to finish the September layout, my heels clicking rhythmically against the polished marble floors of the Moda headquarters. I was exhausted, but I had a surprise for Julian. I'd finally convinced the board to put him on the cover of our Men of the Year issue, the break his struggling acting career desperately needed. I pushed open the heavy oak doors to my private suite, expecting to find the room empty. Instead, the scent of a cheap, floral perfume hit me, a sharp contrast to my signature sandalwood. My heart didn't just drop, it shattered. Julian was in my executive chair, the chair I had earned through a decade of blood, sweat, and tears. And he wasn't alone. Chloe, a 19-year-old starlet I had mentored, was draped across his lap. Julian, I whispered, the word feeling like a piece of glass in my throat. They scrambled apart. Julian's face went from shock to a terrifying, calculated coldness in seconds. He didn't look guilty, he looked annoyed. Sienna, you're supposed to be at the printers, Julian said, his voice smooth, the same voice he used to rehearse the scripts I paid for. Get out, Chloe, I said, my voice shaking. The girl didn't wait. She grabbed her shoes and bolted, leaving me alone with the man I had built a life for. How long? I asked, looking at the man I thought I loved. How long have you been using my office, my connections, and my bed for this? Don't be dramatic, Sienna, Julian said, standing up. He walked toward me, his stature intimidating. It's Hollywood. You know how it works. She's a rising star. Being with her helps my image. Your image? I laughed, a bitter, jagged sound. I gave you your image. I paid your headshot photographers, I bought your suits, I introduced you to every director in this city. You're nothing without me. His eyes darkened. Julian had always had a temper, hidden under a layer of struggling artist sensitivity. I'm tired of being your pet project, Sienna. I'm tired of being Mr. Sienna Vance. I deserve that cover, and I don't need your permission anymore. You're getting nothing, I snapped, reaching for the desk phone. I'm calling the board. I'm pulling the cover. And I'm filing for divorce. He moved faster than I could react. He grabbed my wrist, his grip bruising. You're not ruining this for me. That cover is my meal ticket. Let me go, Julian. I screamed. In a fit of panicked rage, he shoved me. It wasn't a light push. It was a full-force strike to my chest. I flew backward, my heels catching on the rug. The world tilted as I fell. The last thing I felt was the sharp, unforgiving edge of my white marble desk connecting with the base of my skull. Sienna? I heard him whisper, his voice fading. Sienna, get up. Don't be like this. The darkness was cold. The last thing I saw was Julian standing over me, not calling for help, but reaching for my phone to delete the evidence of his calls. I died in the office I loved, killed by the man I had made. I woke up with a gasp that felt like I was inhaling fire. My hands flew to the back of my head, expecting blood and shattered bone, but there was only the soft, cool texture of high-thread County Egyptian cotton. I was in my bed, my penthouse. The morning sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow over the room. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Sienna? Are you okay, babe? You're shaking. I froze. That voice. Julian was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a tray with a green juice and a single croissant. He looked younger, softer, his eyes full of that faux devotion that had fooled me for years. He reached out to touch my forehead, and I flinched so violently I nearly fell off the bed. Don't touch me, I hissed. Julian's brow furrowed.
Whoa, easy. It was just a nightmare.
You've been working too hard on the January issue.
January?
I scrambled for my phone on the nightstand. January 15th. I was back. 6 months before the marble desk. 6 months before the starlet. Today was the day of the Moda Winter Gala, the night I was supposed to introduce Julian to Marcus Miller, the biggest director in New York. The night I gave him his big break. I'm fine, I managed to say, my voice trembling. I forced myself to look at him. He looked so innocent. It was sickening. I just need a moment. Take your time, Julian said, smiling that perfect, rehearsed smile. I'll leave your juice here. Don't forget, the tailor is coming at noon for my gala suit. You picked the velvet one, remember? I remember, I whispered. I waited until I heard the shower running. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. This wasn't a dream. The pain of the marble was too real, the coldness of death too vivid. I had been given a second chance, but not for a happily ever after. I had been given 6 months to dismantle the monster I had created. I got dressed in record time, choosing a sharp, black Chanel power suit. I needed to see someone. Someone who hadn't been in my room when I died, but who had always been by my side. When I stepped into the moda lobby, the staff whispered their greetings. I walked straight to my office. Standing outside my door, tablet in hand and a perfectly timed espresso waiting, was Leo. Leo, my executive assistant. He was 26, brilliant, and possessed a poker face that could win in Vegas. In my previous life, I had treated him like a shadow. Now, he looked like my only hope. Good morning, Sienna, Leo said, his voice calm and steady. Your 9 a.m. is moved to 10 o'clock, the gala seating chart is finalized, and Julian's publicist called twice about the red carpet order. I looked at Leo. He didn't look away. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, a deep, quiet loyalty that I had ignored for too long. Leo, I said, my voice low, cancel the publicist. And come inside. Lock the door. Leo didn't blink. He followed me in and turned the lock. Is something wrong, Sienna? Everything is wrong, Leo, I said, sitting at the desk that would have killed me. And I think you're the only one who knows exactly how wrong it is. Leo stood in front of my desk, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. Most people were intimidated by me, but Leo always seemed to be observing me from a place of quiet understanding. What do you need me to do, Sienna?
Leo asked.
The gala tonight, I started, my fingers tracing the edge of the marble. I'm supposed to introduce Julian to Marcus Miller for the lead in The Last Kingdom. I want you to make sure Marcus doesn't show up until Julian is out of the room. Leo's eyebrows shot up, the most emotion I'd ever seen from him. But you've been lobbying for this for months. Julian has been telling everyone he's already got the part. Julian has been telling everyone a lot of things, I said, meeting Leo's gaze. From now on, the only person Julian Vance is auditioning for is himself. I want him sidelined. I want him frustrated. And I want to know everything he's doing when I'm not looking. Leo didn't ask why. He didn't ask if I'd lost my mind. He simply set his tablet down on the desk and leaned in. I've been waiting for you to ask me that for a long time, Leo said, his voice dropping to a whisper. What do you mean? I don't just manage your schedule, Sienna, Leo said. I manage your life. And I've seen how he spends your money. I've seen the way he speaks to the interns when you aren't around. And I've seen the girls he meets at the hotel on 51st Street while you're at the printer. My breath hitched. You knew? And you didn't tell me? I tried, Leo said, a flash of regret crossing his face. In October, I left a folder on your desk with his credit card statements. You told me it was clutter and threw it away. You weren't ready to see him then. I felt a wave of shame wash over me. He was right. I had been so blinded by the idea of the perfect couple that I had ignored the man who was actually looking out for me. I'm ready now, Leo, I said. Show me everything. Leo reached into his bag and pulled out a small, encrypted thumb drive. I've been recording his calls from the home office for 3 months. I have photos of him with Chloe, the new starlet from the indie film. I even have the receipts for the jewelry he bought her using your joint account. I looked at the drive. This was the ammunition I needed, but I couldn't just divorce him. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he'd stolen. Keep the drive safe, I said. Tonight we go to the gala. I'm going to play the part of the doting wife one last time. But tomorrow, we start draining the accounts. And the cover?
Leo asked.
The Men of the Year issue? Tell the creative director we're pivoting, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. We're doing a feature on rising stars of the theater instead. And make sure Julian's name isn't even in the footnotes. He's going to be furious, Sienna, Leo warned. Let him be, I said. A man with no career and no money doesn't have much of a voice. The gala was a blur of sequins, champagne, and bile. I stood by Julian's side, my hand resting on his arm, feeling the muscle of a man who would eventually use that strength to kill me. He was preening, telling everyone who would listen about his upcoming project with Marcus Miller. Sienna, darling. Marcus Miller approached us, a glass of scotch in hand. Julian beamed, straightening his velvet blazer. Marcus. We were just talking about Leo, I called out, interrupting Julian mid-sentence. Leo appeared instantly, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Marcus, have you tried these? And Julian, honey, the CEO of Moda is looking for you in the VIP lounge. He wanted to talk about the cover. The cover? Julian's eyes lit up.
Right.
Excuse me, Marcus. We'll talk in a bit. Julian practically ran toward the lounge. I turned to Marcus, my smile sharpening. Actually, Marcus, I wanted to talk to you about a new talent. Not Julian, his schedule is becoming quite complicated. I have a young actor from the Royal Academy I think is much better suited for the Last Kingdom. By the time Julian returned, Marcus was gone, and the role had been promised to someone else. Julian was vibrating with a mix of confusion and ego. Where did he go? Julian hissed, grabbing my arm a little too tightly. I went to the lounge, and the CEO wasn't even there. Oh, he must have stepped out, I said, patting his hand. Don't worry, honey. There's always another role. We went home in a tense silence. The moment we were inside the penthouse, I went to my study and locked the door. Leo was already there, waiting in the shadows. Did you get the access codes? I asked. Yes, Leo said, sitting at my laptop. I've mirrored your joint accounts. Julian has been siphoning off about $10,000 a month into a private account under his mother's name. He thinks he's being clever.
Move it, I said.
All of it. Leave him with exactly $500. And the credit cards? Cancelled as of 3 a.m. tomorrow morning, Leo said. I've also started the transfer of your personal assets into a new holding company. I'm calling it Apex Media. The new magazine, I whispered. Independent.
Fierce.
Unstoppable, Leo said, looking up from the screen. For the first time, he smiled. It was a small, dangerous thing. Just like you, Sienna. I couldn't do this without you, Leo, I said, leaning against the desk. Why are you doing this? You could have just walked away and found a better boss. Leo stood up, walking toward me until he was just inches away. He was taller than he seemed, and the air around him felt steady and safe. Because I watched you build an empire for a man who didn't even know your favorite color, Leo said, his voice low and intense. I've been waiting for you to realize you're the empire, Sienna. Not him. He reached out, his hand hovering over mine on the desk. He didn't touch me, but the heat from his skin was enough to make my heart skip a beat. Tomorrow, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The world finds out Julian Vance is a fraud. The next morning, the sun didn't just rise, it heralded a revolution. I woke up at 6 a.m., my mind sharp and humming with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I chose my outfit with the precision of a general preparing for a final charge, a stark, brilliant white Alexander McQueen power suit. White for new beginnings, and white because it made me look untouchable. I was sitting at the marble breakfast bar, a different marble than the one that had claimed my life, sipping a cup of black coffee when Julian finally emerged from the master suite at 10 a.m. He looked hungover, his hair a mess, wearing a silk robe I had bought him during our first anniversary in Capri. He looked smug, the look of a man who thought his greatest challenge today would be choosing which luxury watch to wear. I'm going to call my agent, Julian said, his voice scratchy as he reached for his phone on the counter. I want to see the final contract for the Moda cover today. I told Chloe I'd take her to celebrate once the news breaks. You do that, honey, I said, my voice as smooth as the espresso in my cup. But you might find the reception a bit chilly. I watched him. It took exactly 4 minutes. First, the confusion as he scrolled through his banking app. Then, the frantic redialing. finally, the roar that shook the kitchen. "What do you mean, canceled?" Julian screamed into his phone. "My card was declined at the coffee shop downstairs. And my agent says the MODA cover has been pulled? There must be a mistake. Do you know who I am?" He slammed the phone down and stormed into the kitchen, his face a mottled purple, veins popping in his neck. "Sienna, what the hell is going on? My private account is empty. My cards are dead. And my agent says you personally called the board to pull the Men of the Year feature." I didn't look up. I took another slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. "I did. And I moved the money, Julian." Julian froze, his hands trembling on the counter. "You what?" "I moved the money," I said, finally meeting his gaze. My eyes were cold, void of the warmth he had exploited for so long. "Every cent I earned. The money you've been siphoning off to buy Cartier bracelets for Chloe and pay for that suite at the hotel on 51st Street. I'm not a bank, Julian. I'm a business. And I've decided to stop investing in a failing asset." "Sienna, I can explain," he started, his voice cracking as he tried to shift back into the devoted husband role. "You can't," I interrupted. "I have the digital footprints, Julian. I have the recordings of your calls from the home office. I even have the receipts for the jewelry you bought using my corporate card. You didn't just betray me. You were sloppy about it. You think you can just dump me?" Julian hissed, the sweet persona finally evaporating to reveal the jagged, ugly monster underneath. He stepped toward me, his stature intimidating. "I'll sue you for everything. We're married. I'm entitled to half of this penthouse, half of your salary, and half of that new magazine you're whispering about." "Actually," I said, pulling a heavy, silver-stamped folder from my bag and sliding it across the marble. "You signed a very specific post-nuptial agreement last year when you wanted that loan for your indie film pilot. It contains a bad actor clause, ironic, I know, that stipulates any proven infidelity or financial embezzlement nullifies your claim to my assets. Leo helped me refine the language weeks ago. You were so busy checking your reflection in the mirror that you didn't even read the fine print before you signed." Julian's face went white. He lunged for me, his hands reaching for my throat, the exact same movement that had ended my life in the first timeline.
"You bitch.
I'll kill you before I let you ruin me." But this time, I wasn't alone. The heavy doors to the penthouse swung open with a bang. Two massive security guards I'd hired through Leo's firm stepped in, followed by Leo himself. Leo didn't look like an assistant. He looked like an executioner. He moved with a quiet, lethal grace, stepping directly between me and Julian. "Get your hands off her," Leo said, his voice like a shard of ice. He didn't raise his voice, but the sheer authority in it made Julian recoil. Julian backed away, pointing a shaking finger at Leo. You little rat. You did this. You've been poisoning her mind." "No," Leo said, stepping closer until Julian was backed against the window. "I just opened her eyes. I've been recording your financial abuse for months, Julian. Every time you spoke to her like she was a paycheck, I was there. Every time you cheated, I had a lens on you. I didn't poison her. I protected her." "Get him out of here," I said, standing up and smoothing my white blazer. I felt light, as if gravity no longer applied to me. "And Leo? Call the trades. I want the press release out by noon. Julian Vance is being released from all MODA associations due to a breach of contract and personal misconduct." As the guards dragged Julian out, his screams of, "You'll regret this," echoing down the hallway until the elevator doors cut them off, a profound silence settled over the room. Leo turned to me, his expression softening instantly. "Are you okay, Sienna? He didn't touch you, did he?" "I'm perfect," I said, feeling the final shadow of the marble desk lift from my soul. I looked at Leo, really seeing him for the first time, the loyalty, the hidden strength, the man who had stayed in the trenches with me. "Actually, I'm better than perfect. I'm free." "Good," Leo said, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. "Because the car is waiting. We have a magazine to launch, and I think the world is ready for a real queen." The air in the new Apex Media headquarters didn't smell like the stifling, antique perfumes of moda. It smelled of fresh ink, expensive espresso, and the sharp, ozone scent of a storm finally breaking. We had taken over a loft in Tribeca, all industrial glass and raw steel, a space that didn't need marble to feel powerful. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the New York skyline. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I wasn't looking at the city as something to conquer, but as something I already owned. The pre-orders for the inaugural digital issue just broke the 6-figure mark. Leo's voice drifted from behind me. I turned. He was leaning against the doorway of my new office, a tablet in one hand and 2 glasses of chilled champagne in the other. He had traded his assistant uniform for a sharp, charcoal suit that made him look less like a shadow and more like the sun. 6 figures in 3 hours? I asked, a genuine smile tugging at my lips. People love a comeback story, Sienna, Leo said, walking toward me. He handed me a glass, his fingers brushing mine. The contact sent a jolt through me that was far more intoxicating than the alcohol. Especially when the lead character burns the old script and writes a masterpiece. And Julian? I asked, the name feeling like a piece of grit I was finally washing away. Leo set his tablet on the desk. I took your advice. I didn't just block his calls. I made sure everyone knew why he was calling. He tried to crash a casting for a mid-tier streaming series this morning. The security guard didn't even check his ID. He just handed Julian a copy of the Bad Actor press release and told him to leave the premises. I leaned back against my desk, sipping the champagne. He's desperate. A man like Julian doesn't know how to exist without an audience. He'll try to sell a tell-all story next. He already tried, Leo said, a dark glint of satisfaction in his eyes. He went to the Gotham Insider with a harrowing tale of your emotional instability. I had our legal team send them a copy of the non-disclosure agreement he signed as part of his marital settlement, along with a cease and desist that threatened to bankrupt his entire extended family if a single word was printed. They spiked the story in 10 minutes. You really think of everything, don't you? I looked at him, truly seeing the man who had been my silent sentinel for so long. Leo stepped closer, invading my personal space in a way that felt like a homecoming rather than an intrusion. I told you, Sienna. I've been practicing for this for 3 years. Every time he made you cry in that old office, I was in the next room, mapping out exactly how I'd dismantle him if you ever gave me the signal. Why did you wait? I whispered. You could have told me sooner. You could have saved me years of that. You weren't ready, Leo said softly. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face before he finally gained the courage to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was warm, steady, and infinitely more real than anything Julian had ever offered. You had to see the fire for yourself before you could appreciate the light. If I had stepped in too early, I would have just been another man trying to control you. I wanted you to choose your own freedom. The silence between us wasn't heavy. It was a living thing, charged with a tension that made the air feel thin. I realized then that the protector wasn't just a role Leo played, it was who he was. And for the first time, I didn't want to be protected from across the room. I wanted him right here. I choose this, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I choose us, Leo. He didn't hesitate. He set his glass down on the desk and closed the distance, his hands finding my waist and pulling me flush against him. When he kissed me, it wasn't a rehearsed performance for a camera or a gala. It was deep, honest, and tasted of a future that was finally, beautifully, mine to write. We have a gala tonight, he murmured against my lips, his breath hitching. The official launch. Are you ready to show them the new face of Apex? Only if you're standing right next to me, I said. The Fashion Week Gala was the pinnacle of the New York social season, a night where reputations were either forged in gold or burned to ash. I stood in the penthouse, staring at my reflection. I wore a custom-made silver gown that looked like liquid moonlight poured over my skin. It was daring, sharp, and entirely different from the safe, demure styles Julian used to prefer for me. You aren't just a guest tonight, Sienna. Leo's voice came from the doorway. I turned to see him, and for a moment, the air left my lungs. He was in a tailored midnight blue tuxedo that highlighted the breadth of his shoulders and the intensity of his gaze. He wasn't standing 2 steps behind me with a tablet anymore. He walked toward me and offered his arm, his expression one of fierce pride. "Tonight, you're the main event," he said, his voice a low, steady anchor. "I'm nervous," I confessed, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for his arm. "The last time I walked a red carpet, I was propping up a lie. Tonight, everything is real." Leo covered my hand with his thumb stroking my knuckles. "The only thing Julian ever gave you was a shadow. Tonight, you're the light, and I won't let anyone dim it." The arrival at the Museum of Art was a sensory overload. The flashes of the paparazzi were so constant they felt like a solid wall of light. In my previous life, Julian would have stepped ahead, basking in the attention while I stayed in the background. Now, Leo stayed perfectly in sync with me, his presence a silent warning to anyone who thought I was vulnerable. "Sienna, over here. Is it true Apex has already signed 3 major luxury brands?" "Sienna, can we get a comment on the Julian Vance embezzlement rumors?" I stopped at the top of the grand staircase, the Apex Media logo gleaming on the step and repeat behind me. "Tonight is about the future of fashion," I said into the forest of microphones, my voice amplified and steady. "As for the past, we've left it exactly where it belongs, in the rearview mirror." Suddenly, the rhythmic clicking of the cameras turned into a chaotic frenzy. A man was pushing through the security barricades at the edge of the red carpet. He looked disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, wearing a tuxedo that had seen better days, one I recognized as a gift I'd bought him 2 years ago. "Sienna," Julian screamed, his voice cracking. "You can't do this to me. You're destroying my life. You think you're so smart with your little assistant boyfriend?" The crowd gasped. The cameras pivoted toward the wreckage of the man who had once been the it boy of New York. Julian looked pathetic, a stark contrast to the silver-clad queen I had become. "Get back, Julian," Leo said, his voice dropping into a lethal, quiet register. He didn't move toward him, but the way he shifted his weight told me he was ready to end the confrontation in a heartbeat. "She's mine," Julian roared, lunging past a distracted guard. "Everything she has, she owes to me." Before he could get within 10 feet of me, the security team I'd prepped with Leo's help swarmed him. They didn't just stop him. They handled him with a cold, professional efficiency that made Julian look even more like a common interloper. I walked down the stairs toward the line, stopping just inches from where he was being pinned. The cameras were recording every second of his humiliation. "Look at yourself, Julian," I said, my voice barely a whisper but carrying through the silent crowd. "I didn't destroy your life. I just stopped funding your delusions. You were never the star. You were just the distraction." "I'll kill you," Julian sobbed, the words empty and hollow. "I'll make you regret." "You've already done your worst, Julian," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "And I'm still standing. Now, get him out of my sight. He's trespassing on a private event." As they dragged him away, his pathetic pleas fading into the New York night, I felt the final link to that marble desk snap. I turned back to the crowd, my head held high. "Where were we?" I asked with a sharp, brilliant smile. Leo stepped up beside me, his hand finding the small of my back. "We were just about to show them the new masthead," he murmured, his eyes full of a heat that promised a much better ending to the night. The view from the top floor of the Apex Tower was a far cry from the cold, sterile heights of Moda. Here, the walls were lined with the covers of the last 12 months, each one a testament to a year of risks, late nights, and a vision that Julian had once tried to claim was impossible without him. The air was vibrant, filled with the hum of a staff that respected me not because they feared me, but because we had built something revolutionary together. I stood at the window, a glass of vintage champagne in my hand, watching the sunset bleed gold across the New York skyline. It had been exactly 1 year since I woke up in a cold sweat, clutching the back of my head and gasping for air that felt like fire. "You're brooding again, Sienna. It's the anniversary of the launch, not a funeral." I didn't need to turn around to know it was Leo. His voice had become the soundtrack to my life, steady, warm, and infused with a quiet strength that still made my heart skip a beat. I felt him move behind me, his presence a comforting weight. He wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me back against the solid heat of his chest. "I'm not brooding," I said, leaning my head back against his shoulder. "I'm reflecting. A year ago today, Julian was screaming at the security guards at the gala. Now where exactly?" Leo chuckled, the vibration rumbling through my back. "The latest update from the private investigator? He's in a suburb outside of Des Moines. He's the face of a local used auto commercial. Apparently, his acting range is perfectly suited for screaming about 0% financing." "A fitting end," I murmured, a smile tugging at my lips. "He was a parasite, Sienna," Leo said, his voice dropping into that low, possessive register that always made my breath hitch. He turned me in his arms, his hands resting on my hips. "He didn't just want your money. He wanted to dim your light, so he could feel brighter. He never realized that you're the sun. You don't need anyone to help you shine." "I needed you," I whispered, looking up into his dark, intense eyes. "I would have been lost in that rewind without you, Leo. You were the only thing that felt real when the world was resetting." Leo reached up, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw with a tenderness that still felt like a miracle. "I've loved you through 2 lifetimes, Sienna. In the first one, I was content to be your shadow, making sure the world didn't hurt you more than it already had. In this one, I'm never letting go." He leaned down, and the kiss was slow, deep, and tasted of everything we had built. It wasn't just passion. It was a partnership. He wasn't the assistant or the protector anymore. He was my equal. "I have something for you," Leo said when we finally pulled apart, his eyes glittering with a secret. "Another acquisition? A new lead for the September issue." I teased.
"Better," he said.
He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. My heart stopped. "This isn't a contract, and it's not a business proposal. It's a promise. No marble desks. No lies. Just a life where you never have to look over your shoulder again." He opened the box to reveal a ring that wasn't a traditional diamond, but a brilliant, rare sapphire, the color of the sky at dawn. "Leo," I breathed, the tears finally stinging my eyes. "Sienna Vance," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Will you give me the next 50 years to show you that you are always the Empire?" "Yes," I said, pulling him toward me. 1,000 times yes. As the city lights began to twinkle below us, I realized the rewind had finally stopped. I wasn't living a second chance anymore. I was living my first real life. The past was a closed book, the villain was a forgotten footnote, and for the first time, the woman on the masthead was finally, truly happy.